efficiency, all people more benefited information to enrich our knowledge, especially in qualitative data analysis, without spending more time on this thing. Then I would like to request Eddie Gawain sir to proceed the session. Over to you, Eddie Gawali sir. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Khodka, for your welcoming notes. Now, let me introduce today's speaker of the webinar, Margaret Rolla. Margaret Rolla is a researcher who focuses on both qualitative and quantitative research. She has been leading Rolla research since 1981 and is also connected with the New School. Margaret is experienced in various research methods and works closely with sponsors to ensure top-notch research results. Her expertise covers a range of qualitative services like focus group discussions, interview, and ethnographic studies. She is known for her hands-on approach, handling crucial tasks herself rather than delegating them. Some of the notable publications include several articles on qualitative research design and books as well. The major themes cover in her products are meaning finding techniques and quality considerations. She has also contributed significantly to the field through her involvement in organizations like American Psychological Association, American Association for Public Opinion Research, Qualitative Research Consultant Association, and the American Evaluation Association. Her dedication to top quality research, along with her collaborative spirit and extensive experience, makes her a highly respected figure in both qualitative and quantitative research methods. Now, I would like to extend an invitation to Margaret Roller to present the session. Welcome to you, Roller. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the warm introductions and comments. It's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hang on. All right.
Okay,
We
you
can
can
all
see her.
You can all see my screen. Okay. Um, Unfortunately, I now cannot see any of you, but okay. um, let me start. That was a wonderful introduction and welcome, and thank you very much. Let me just before I go further, tell you a little bit more about kind of where I'm coming from. As you'll soon learn, my favorite word is context, and I'm going to provide a little bit of context about me right now. um, my graduate degree is in psychology, and when I left graduate school, I knew a lot about quantitative research and experimental design. I knew nothing really at all about qualitative research. But one thing I did know very clearly in my mind when I left graduate school is that I wanted to be a researcher. Um, and I defined that for myself as someone who was very well grounded and comfortable, not just in quantitative research, but also in qualitative research. So that's what I set out to do. Back in that time, it was not possible to go back to graduate school and learn about qualitative research. So I chose the only other real option for me, which is to go out in the real world. So I went out in the real world and with the very focused purpose of learning about qualitative research design and implementation and analysis, and then combine that with my knowledge of quantitative to work on mixed methods research ultimately. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from. Today, I want to begin our discussion, and I'm going to confess I begin all of my discussions regardless of what area of qualitative research I'm talking about, with my definition of what qualitative research is. And that is, again, to provide you with context so that you kind of understand where I'm coming from when I talk about qualitative research, and then get into qualitative data analysis. You can see here the areas I'm going to cover today: skills, approaches, format, tools, processes, and I will spend a little bit of time at the end on CAGNIS and artificial intelligence, because how can you not in this day and age? A lot of my thinking, and I'll be talking a lot today about a quality approach, and a lot, if not all, of what I am talking about comes from the book that Paula Rakis and I wrote on the Total Quality Framework. And I will give references to that, as well as some other sources I talk about today at the end of this presentation. So that's kind of who I am and the layout of where we're going with our discussion today. So what the heck is qualitative research? Qualitative research, as I state here, really embraces the idea that that the researcher is going to go beyond the obvious, beyond the expedient, beyond what you can just see at a manifest level, and really look for interpretations of participants' lived experiences, their behavior, and their attitudes. So again, it's all about context and the interconnections of human thought and behavior that we're looking at and focused on and care about in qualitative research, which is another way of saying that the response to any single research question is going to really sit in relationship to other questions, if that makes any sense. So you ask participant a question, you get a response, fine and good. But when you do your analysis and interpretation, you're not looking at just the answer to that response to that question, but you are looking at the participants' responses and answers to all of your questions in order to provide the framework in which to make an appropriate interpretation and analysis. There are at least 10, these are the 10 that I can think of. We talk about this in a bit in our book, and I talk about this a lot in my blog and all, are at least 10 unique attributes to qualitative research. And you can see them there. Two of them, context, once again, and the importance of meaning, I've highlighted here because in my mind, the importance of context and meaning really underlies, drives all the other unique attributes, and is really at the core of qualitative research. And let me mention here that, and I'll probably, I'm sure to say this again, but as I go forward talking about qualitative data analysis in a minute, the reason I'm giving you my definition of qualitative research and why I'm showing you this graphic of unique attributes is because this is really kind of critical in grounding you or anyone who's going to conduct qualitative data analysis, really grounding them on what is important to qualitative research. And what I want to say is, regardless of, I'm going to show you a certain approach to qualitative data analysis. What is important is, even if your approach should change a little bit or be a little bit different than what I give you today, what is, I think, even more important is that you are grounded in what the heck qualitative research is, and that you are thinking about these unique attributes. So what is qualitative research good for? Well, it's good for exploring motivations, again, underlying attitudes and behavior, deeply felt experiences associated with certain topics, particularly if we get into personal, sensitive, or complex topics. In the end, you are discovering how people think and the terminology they use about a certain issue. In order to gain a nuanced feedback on visual stimuli, I will say that I'm going to say a good portion, I don't know how many, but it is not at all uncommon to use qualitative research to explore visual stimuli. I've used the examples here of documents, newsletters, online content, but it is not at all, because qualitative research is such a very good approach for gaining that kind of feedback that you wouldn't be able to gain otherwise. And it contributes greatly to, it's been proven over and over, contribute greatly to community program improvement. It also, and I've already alluded to this, but very specifically, it deepens our commitment to the most deserving segments of the society, meaning the underrepresented, the marginalized, such as children, low socioeconomic status groups, ethnic and racial minority groups, those with physical or mental disabilities, health issues. Qualitative research is conducted greatly in healthcare and health research. Sensitive issues, and what Donna Mertens and a lot of people call wicked problems, meaning social injustice, climate change, those kinds of very wicked, complicated problems and issues that really can only be explored in a very mixed methods, including qualitative research approach. So qualitative research, there are a variety of methods. In-depth interviews and focus group discussions are probably the two most popular methods in qualitative research. I would put, as I have here, put in-depth interviews on top as being the most popular. Ethnography, narrative research, case study research, and content analysis. Okay. All right. Let's talk about data analysis, as we will for the rest of this session. Here we get to a unique attribute of qualitative research, in this case, the contextual analysis. I told you I was going to use the word context a lot, and sure enough, there it is. As you can imagine, you think back to everything I've mentioned so far, and unique attributes of qualitative research is no surprise that unique attributes bring a lot of challenges, a lot of challenges, and really, I would say, all aspects of qualitative research, but particularly when you are talking about qualitative data analysis, and where the meaning and context is so important to a quality outcome of your analysis. Needless to say, but I'll say it, is that in conducting qualitative data analysis, you need to very much keep in mind that qualitative research does not and will not produce discrete bits of data. And this is something else I will mention again as we move along here. So as an example, looking for just words that people use, and I will mention this again, but just using, doing your analysis maybe around words that people use is probably not, again, unless terminology, some aspect of terminology is important to the research objective. I understand that, but otherwise, it is not considered a good qualitative data analysis to simply focus on, let's say, particular words. It's the idea that in the same as respect that you that qualitative research does not produce discrete bits of data, the data are interrelated. So I've used the examples of responsive, fixes problems, listens. So when I conduct interviews, for instance, with um, customers, let's say, or well, let's say customers of a particular service of my client may offer, and they use words like responsive, fixes problems, and listens. Uh, those words in and of themselves are not that interesting from the qualitative researcher's perspective, but it's how the use of those words and terminology are related and what they mean in that context, in their relationship. So the qualitative researcher conducting an analysis, the goal is to create a narrative, a story, based on participants' attitudes and behavior associated with the research questions and objectives. You will hear me also mention, again, as we move forward, ask you to focus on your research questions and objectives, particularly your research objectives. And you will see in the process to analysis that I focus on key research objectives in the approach to the analysis, which you'll see in a minute. So anyway, keeping your research objectives clearly, to first of all, define them clearly, and to keep them clearly in your mind throughout analysis is very, very important. And in the analysis, it's looking at the relationships and having an understanding, as I say here, that the analysis is a conceptual process. It's very much not, this is very much not survey research, okay? So it's really keeping in mind that this is a conceptual process, and that is the underlying meaning and not necessarily the words themselves. And again, I'm going to start to repeat myself, so just bear with me. But it is the underlying meaning, not necessarily the words themselves, that are important. Unless, if I've already said, unless a key objective of the research is to understand very specific terminology, that is fine. But otherwise, it's, as I say, the underlying meaning, not necessarily the words themselves. And it is another way of saying the contextual meaning of words. And I've just randomly put a list of words here that, again, come up in the research I do all the time. And again, it's not so much that one or more of my participants uses the word knowledgeable or service or impact or ethical or responsive. It is the context in which they use those words, in the context in terms of their own life experience related to the research objective, as well as the context of the other words that are used around it. So to put more simply, and again, I apologize, I will be repeating myself throughout this. I'm saying kind of the same thing in different ways, but there's a reason to my madness here. So to put it more simply, qualitative data analysis is not linear. It's not point A goes to necessarily to point B. It's focused on the latent, not on the manifest content, which is not to say we ignore the manifest content. It means that as the qualitative researcher analyst, you are very much focused on the latent meaning of your content, of your data, and that it's holistic. Very important. And you'll see that as we go through the process, what I mean by that. But it is looking at the entire lived experience of a participant's, let's say, as it relates again to your research objective. Okay. In terms of skills, the researcher conducting a qualitative analysis needs to be open-minded, flexible, ready for surprises. be ready, open to discovering something like, oh, I never thought somebody would think that. So being open to surprises, being aware and willing to explore the unknown, and that becomes very important. I've used the example here of just exploring what somebody has said, that that only the analyst, the researcher conducting the analysis, can really understand only by looking at the entirety of what this participant's contribution is to the research and understanding what something means, such as, I like the vibe at our fundraisers. Well, not taking that at face value, but exploring exactly what that means. Thinking conceptually, again, I've already mentioned this, being able to create a narrative, going in and saying, I'm going to create a story. And that is very much how I approach analysis. When I am going through the process I'm about to show you in a minute, in the end, when I'm kind of putting it all together in my head, I am creating a story. And being able to, willing and able to look for evidence that may support or refute your data. And that becomes particularly important in the step I will mention in the process of verification, which means looking at other data, other sources that may, as I say here, may or may not support or refute your data, and being open to that, and to always be asking yourself, what in the heck is going on here? So it's being, in other words, the researcher doing a qualitative data analysis is, if it's not always already obvious, which I think it is very active. They are not passive in any way. They are very active and involved in it's a very active process, I guess what I want to say. And one of the skills that is very important is for the researcher to know that going in, and know going in that you are going to be an active participant in this. There are, as I say here, a variety of approaches or paradigms or orientations that the researcher can bring to the analysis process, to qualitative research itself. And mention a couple here. One is discourse analysis, where the researcher is focused on language and social construction of speech, interaction and conversation analysis, things of that nature. Grounded theory is another orientation that some researchers have to qualitative research. And grounded theory basically combines data collection and analysis in an iterative process. This is where the idea of saturation comes in. In other words, the grounded theory researcher will collect data, and when there is a feeling that some of this same ideas or potential themes are being heard during the course of data collection, the researcher may stop and say, okay, we've reached saturation, what we're calling saturation. We're not going to conduct any more interviews. Anyone who is interested in this thing called saturation, I have written a blog post on that, which you may find interesting. And as you might guess, the blog post, the article, talks about saturation in the context of a quality approach to qualitative research. And anyway, so if you're interested in that, you can read that there. So those are a couple of approaches to qualitative research. My approach is IPA. I take an interpretive phenomenological analysis approach where the emphasis, and again, this is probably pretty clear from everything I've just said in the earlier slides, that my focus, my emphasis is on participants' lived experiences with the topic that we're talking about, with the objective we're trying to reach with the research. And in my approach, it is focused on describing the participants' thinking and the experience based on the context in which it is told, while also interpreting this description as it relates to the broader context, meaning how it relates to other areas of an interview, let's say, with a particular participant, as well as, and you'll see this in a moment when I talk about the process, as well as how it relates to what I hear from other participants in my research. It really conceptualizes the intended meaning, and it looks for overarching themes that address the research objectives. So that is kind of where I am coming from today, and as I go through the analysis process. I guess what I want to say, and how it's very different than grounded theory, is IPA is I am not actively developing a theory. I am everything you see on the slide. I am actively focused on each individual's contribution to the researcher and making sense of each participant's lived experience, and then making sense of how it relates to every other participant's lived experiences, and going from there. There are a variety of formats that our qualitative data can come in. Certainly written transcripts is one of them. And I've emphasized human transcriptionists because obviously AI can provide transcripts. But when we are looking for a human transcriptionist, and trust me, there are some reasons that you may want to use a human transcriptionist. You want to look for someone who is, if possible, you need to look for a transcription. And we talk about this in our book, because from a quality approach, you want to look for a transcriptionist who is knowledgeable about the subject, topic, or category, is sensitive to how people talk in conversation, comfortable with language variations and cultural variations, has experienced transcribing. I've highlighted here the IDI research method, but meaning in-depth interviews, but is experienced in transcribing the focus group method, if that's what you used in your research design, is focus group discussions. And knows how to account for audio that is difficult to hear. So those are some of the things that you just want to keep in mind if you are selecting a human transcriptionist. Other formats, obviously, include recordings, audio and video recordings. I rely on them heavily in my work and in my analysis. Very, very useful. And I would just interject here that video recordings can be very useful, not just in terms of providing you with audio, but the visual of gestures and things that may have gone on in the interview or focus group discussion, let's say, or an observation, that you as the researcher may find useful in your analysis. Unspoken contributions to the data can be very, very useful to the analysis. And images, speaking of unspoken contributions to data, you may get, particularly in the online modes, you will get images In the mobile mode, you will get images from your participants and notes. You may have notes from the researcher. Um, I say interviewers, but it could be researchers, the in-session notes, notes from the audio and the video, and the reflexive journal. And I don't know to what extent you folks are familiar with the reflexive journal. I've just thrown this out here for you to look at. This is an example from our book, but it basically, a reflexive journal, for anyone who doesn't know, is a researcher's diary, basically. So it allows the researcher to go back. So for instance, you've conducted a focus group discussion or an interview. You can go back to your diary, your reflexive journal, and you can ask yourself these kinds of questions. I've just done, now what do I think I know from these participants, and what assumptions did I make? And how did my personal values or beliefs maybe impact the questions I asked, or that kind of thing. So this can be very useful, not only provide additional data information for your analysis, but also clearly during the data collection process can be very, very useful for the researcher to reflect on and think about how they may or may not need to modify the process they're going through. Okay, in terms of tools, for the text data, we have, meaning transcripts or documents, we have Excel, Word. You can use a text analysis software like WordStat, possibly. Cagdis, computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software, which I will touch on after I go through my process. And for data, you have Cagdis and the online interview or focus group platform that you use can be very useful in terms of what they offer in their technology, in terms of analyzing audio, visual, and images. And let me just say that you can also use pen and pencil and paper. That some people still do, and that's can be fine. I think what's important here, and what I just want to, I know I've emphasized this, and I'm going to emphasize it one more time, or maybe at least, well, no, one more time anyway. So, is that what's important is, regardless of the tools you use, is to maintain the thinking that is necessary during the analysis process, which is what we're going to talk about now. So I'm going to offer you these eight basic steps in analysis, but again, want to encourage you, whatever steps or process you use, I just encourage you to think back to the earlier slides where we talked about context and meaning and maintaining the holistic idea through your process. I'm going to briefly go over here 8 steps to the basic analysis process. And these these steps and the examples I'm going to give you, I use Excel, and I rely less on transcripts. Now, let me just say, transcripts are important for record keeping, for transparency, and those kinds of things. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use, but for me, myself, I rely heavily on audio, on recordings, audio and video recordings, and I use Excel, and I'm going to show you through examples how I go through the 8 process. Again, what's important here is the thinking that is required to come out with quality outcomes in the end. So that's what I want to emphasize. All right. Okay. So step 1 is to record each IDI, in-depth interview, focus group, or observation based on the research objectives as soon as possible after you complete the research event. So for instance, after I complete an interview with someone, whether it's online or in person, what I do as soon as possible after that interview is I go, and you'll soon see this, I go to my Excel spreadsheet and I make notes. I also do it on pen and paper. Well, that's another discussion. But by the way, when I do in-depth interviews, I do write a lot of notes during the interview on paper with a pen. And I have a blog article on that topic as well and why I do it that way. But in any case, so soon after the interview, I record what I think I learned from that participant as it relates to the various research objectives. Each researcher involved in the data collection should record this kind of information. So what I mean is it should be the interviewer, such as myself, as I just mentioned. It could be the note taker. It could be someone else, but whoever is involved in data collection should record their thinking and their notes after an interview or a focus group or an observation as it relates to each objective. And again, I'm using Excel, so I record using Excel, again, using the key objectives as column headers, and each case is a row. And I'm going to show you what that means. This is an example of what that means. Here is an example of a study I conducted with chief financial officers in public and private universities and colleges in the United States. And what I'm showing this to show you kind of how I set this up. So each row in my Excel spreadsheet is a participant. You can see over on the left, I've got the number of the participant, the region of the country, whether it was a public or private university, their endowment level, which was a variable that was important to my client, and their education and title. And then across the columns, going across from there, are key objectives of the research. I was conducting this research for a financial institution, and again, going across. And by the way, the Excel spreadsheet goes much further to the right there. It goes on. And also, by the way, let me say that it's very common as I go ahead and I go in after an interview, let's say, I make my notes of how I felt this participant came out and related to each of these objectives. It's not uncommon at all for me to hear something in an interview or a focus group that that is not represented in any of these columns, which are the key research objectives. But maybe they brought up something like, whoa, I never thought about that. And so I create a new column, which is not part of the client's key objectives, but I think is very important for the client to hear. And so I create a new client and start writing notes there. The second step is to review the data within and across research events. So you're internalizing the data. And again, one more time, I will mention that you are internalizing this kind of holistic view, image of a participant's lived experience as it relates to your objectives. So you're internalizing the data. You're looking for the main takeaways, and you're looking for similarities and differences across research events. When I say research events now, I'm talking about in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, observations, things of that nature. Okay, so here's an example. I'm going back to the spreadsheet I showed you a moment ago, but now what you're seeing is I am now looking across, I'm looking within each participant and looking for similarities or of thinking from the participant as it relates across objectives, because ultimately that's what I want to, where I want to go. But anyway, I'm trying to, again, kind of formalize or to think about, internalize and think about the participants' uh, thinking and observations as it relates across objectives. So that here I am kind of looking across objectives within each participant. Here I am looking down. I am looking at what I think I learned from each participant, but with what I think I learned from participants within each objective. And like I say, now I'm kind of looking down and looking at the extent to which participants are agreeing or not agreeing with each other. Here is just another way to visualize the data within and across participants. Here is an example, again, of a study I did. In this case, I had 86 interviews for GuideStar, a provider of nonprofit information. It's the largest provider of nonprofit information. And I collected a lot of interviews having to do with a lot of variety of website features and customer services. And I, as the researcher analyst person, needed a way to visualize and help me visualize where people were coming out in terms of their likes or not so much like across these various services and features. So I created this Excel spreadsheet, which helped me a lot, actually. It was only one tool among others, but it helped a lot, and it was a good contributor to my thinking. Step 3 is about developing codes and labels. You go back to each research event, again, each interview, each focus group discussion, each observation, and look for details related to each objective, and use the Excel spreadsheet or Cagnis, or even, as I've mentioned, even pencil and paper. Whatever tool you use, you want to see the interconnections or popularity of particular attitudes and behaviors based on a fully informed contextual understanding of the data. This is a image from our book, and it's a code book. And depending on the size of your study and the number of researchers involved, you may want to develop a code book. And here's an example of, again, something from our book. And it can, like transcripts, be a good vehicle for transparency. You kind of decide that you have, enough labels and codes when you feel you've captured the kind of the diversity of your data, and you're beginning to see patterns. Step 4 is actually coding, and here again you are very focused on the manifest and the latent content. Preferably you have 2 or more coders. If not, it is beneficial from a quality approach to have someone else, if it's just yourself coding, to have someone else who may be familiar but who has not done the coding to actually look at the coding and at least some portion of it, some significant portion of it, and give you some feedback on how it aligns with their thinking. And again, you're looking for coding and coding accuracy and consistency. Now, unlike quantitative survey research, we do not use Cohen's coefficient or kappa or anything of that nature to assess the reliability of the coding. We do it by consensus. And the reason is because why? We don't have discrete bits of data. So we do it by consensus. I've shown here also another image from the book. It's a coding, what we call a coding form. Think of it as kind of, I showed you before the reflexive journal. Think about this as kind of the coder's diary or the coder's journal. It's allows, when you have two or more coders, it allows coders to reflect on and record how they and why they coded something in a particular way. Again, this can be great for transparency, but also can be very good for the PI or whoever's in charge of the research, if they're not also doing the coding, to look back at this coding form and identify maybe more meaning in the research and the data that they normally would have, as well as maybe some areas where they believe there needs to be more instruction to the coders, and that kind of thing. So now, having talked about coding, let me just interject something here. That just focusing on coding kind of misses the point. So this kind of just a little word of caution. The snippet you see here in this image come again from my blog. I wrote an article about this, basically saying what it says here, that that coding misses the point. And again, our goal is not to deconstruct an interview or discussion. That it goes back to me repeating myself again, which is the holistic nature of qualitative data and keeping it as a whole, and not deconstructing it into bits and pieces or codes. And it's just something that I find researchers have to intentionally keep in their mind as they go through the process, because it becomes very easy, and I will say that it can become easy when you use Cactus, when you use computer-assisted software, that you're really looking at deconstructing it and coming up with codes, and you've got all these codes, and then it's like, whoa, what happened to, keeping this holistic data? So just a word of caution that, you aren't necessarily scrutinizing every word and every sentence or phrase that a participant has used. You're taking a much more global, holistic perspective, keeping things cohesive. Cohesive is a good word. Okay. All right. So speaking of coding, here's the 30 codes I came up with. This goes back to the higher education study I showed you the Excel spreadsheets for before. And these are 30 codes I came up with, and they were very specific to one of several objectives of this research, which was to understand how these financial managers select a bank. These financial managers in higher education select a bank. So step 5 is to take those 30 codes and identify categories, which I often call buckets. And you're going to use these buckets, and I've just shown 3 here, and I'll show you all 8 on the next slide. But each bucket or category are groups of codes that share a construct. And the researcher's job is to carefully study the labels or codes that have been identified, paying attention to what? Context of meaning associated with each one, and then looking or conceptualizing similar ideas. And that's kind of how you come up with your categories and buckets. And in this case, I came up with 8. Each column there represents one of the categories when I came up with when I examined and considered the 30 categories I came up with for this specific objective, selecting a bank. Now, Excel is one way to visualize categories, but PowerPoint and Cagdis, as I've mentioned, are other ways. Here's an example of what was done in PowerPoint, looking at positive leadership, and came up with, as you can see, the categories and then the codes underlying each of those categories. In Atlas TI, which is a Cagdis program, this study of happiness, which was published. Anyway, this researcher used Atlas TI to come up with this visualization of the categories. In step 6, now you're going to identify themes and patterns. And by the way, themes don't just emerge, they don't pop up. It should be obvious by now that themes are very much derived by you, the researcher. And as I say here, just as labels and codes can come together to create categories, categories are interconnected. And it's these interconnections that we use to identify, derive our themes, our patterns. We're looking within categories. We're looking across categories to do so. And we keep in mind that any of the codes, those buckets of codes, can be reused to define multiple themes. So you're looking at your code, your categories of codes. You're coming up with a theme, but then when you go back to look at maybe a new objective or additional themes, you may find that you are reusing some of the codes that you find in these buckets or categories. You want to pay attention, as I say in that last bullet, to the idea that these themes may be similar or different depending on the type of participant. If you have a very mixed group of participants that have been part of your research design and your data collection, you need to pay attention to that. We know it's only qualitative research. You're not going to generalize, but you need to pay attention to that. And as you as a researcher and analyst think that you're hearing and seeing in the data some differences or similarities, you need to identify that and pay attention to that. So here are the themes that when I was looking at themes across categories, I went back to my spreadsheet where I've identified the 8 categories going across there. And I, based on a contextual understanding of what the codes and categories mean, I did some highlighting here to help me visualize where I thought I was seeing themes. So as an example of that, I came up with a theme, strong partnership. Now, my strong partnership theme came from 2 of the categories. Remember, I had 8, but there were 2 categories, the partner category and the communication category, and specific codes within those categories that, in my mind, spoke to this theme, this idea of strong partnership. So specifically out of the partner category or bucket, there were codes that mentioned that I coded as pay attention to me, recommend new products and services, be supportive. And there were 2 codes in the communication category, communicate with me regularly, be responsive to my requests. I felt that those, again, based on a contextual understanding of what those codes mean in my analysis, I felt that they spoke to this broader idea, this broader theme of strong partnership. In the end, I drew interpretations and implications from the data and could state back to my client that in higher education, the key considerations when selecting a bank are the bank's ability to build a strong partnership, provide technical expertise, demonstrate understanding of the higher education sector, provide needed products and services, and have a local community presence. What is important here is that for each one of those, I could very clearly discuss and tell the client, the sponsor of the research, what that means. I was very clear in my mind and in my data and in my visuals and all, what strong partnership means, what technical expertise means, what an understanding of higher education. So I wasn't just going back to the sponsor of the research and say, hey, you need to provide technical expertise. It's like, well, what does that mean? I could tell you what that means. From the process that I just went through with you, I was very much able to tell them what it means. The last step is verification, and I've already mentioned this very briefly, and that's the idea of looking at being willing and able to look for data or evidence that supports or refutes those interpretations. So you've come up with your interpretation, your themes, your interpretations. You think, okay, I know what's going on with this research. I know the answer to these research objectives for my sponsor. But that's when you need to stop and say, wait a minute, maybe I need to, not just maybe, but I need to go back and look at, as I listed, maybe deviant cases, outliers, comments that were made only once or twice that contradict your findings. Personally, I use deviant cases verification a lot. I will go back and look at what it just says there. I will go back to participants comments, very specific comments that may have been made within interviews or discussions, and revisit that. Comments I may have said, well, during analysis, I may say, that doesn't really fit with what I think I'm hearing from everybody else. And I think that's legitimate. But what is important at this step is to go back to that and revisit it and ask yourself, well, does this provide me with useful information or support for what I have already come up with in my analysis, or maybe not? And if not, should I probably will mention this to the sponsor of the research. By the way, here are some instances that it does not support what I am providing you in the analysis. Triangulation, comparing your research to other research that has been done, is another form of verification. Peer review, of course, giving your content and your content, your analysis to someone else who has been independent of your work for their feedback, and the reflexive journal, which I've already mentioned and showed you very briefly, would be another avenue to look at when you are thinking about verification, thinking about how you can look at your data a little bit differently, or look at your analysis and say what supports or refutes what I've got here. So reflexive journal would be another way of doing that. Let's talk a little bit about CAGDAS, computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software. CAGDAS can be great in terms of analyzing multiple data formats, which I've already mentioned. Coding, it clearly facilitates coding and codebook development, allows collaboration, which is very important when you have multiple people involved in your research and the analysis. It offers transparency, which again is very important and is something we talk from a total quality framework approach. It is a key component in that framework, and it can allow you to display your data in a variety of ways in terms of visualization. So in these respects, it can be very, very important. I just want to emphasize it does not and should not, of course, replace all of the context, meaning, and interpretation that the researcher brings to the analysis process. Again, I'm going to say it again. Remember what our goal is. Go back to the earlier slides. Remember what our goal is, and just always keep that in mind. There are many, many choices when it comes to cactus, and here are just the images of just a few of over 40, I think, the last time I looked, of cactus programs that are out here. Here is a word cloud that I created for research I conducted for the Environmental Protection Agency here in the U.S. And I'm showing this. I'm showing this to you as an example of the kind of thing you can generate from Cactus. I want to just add just a little bit of caution here. And by the way, I did not use this in my reporting, and actually didn't even really use it in my analysis so much. I didn't use it in my report because of why. It goes back to everything I've already said today, which is about context and meaning, and how you just can't pick out a word like environmental and make that mean something. I show this to you really as an example of what can be done in Cactus. And as we go on here, I'm going to be showing you other examples of visualization. So the word cloud was one example of visualization. This is from what you see here is from Atlas TI, which is a network of various, shows the network of various elements in a project, and gives you a visual sense of the theory or framework that you derive from your research. This is also from Atlas TI. It's a tree map. It shows which codes appear most often in your data, and where meaningful patterns may lie in your data. And it can, if you click on those, it will even pop up relevant quotes that go with those codes. This is a word tree from NVivo, and on the top is a word tree from NVivo, and then QD Miner on the bottom part of that. The second image there is from QD Miner and shows with WordStat and shows word in context, which I love that, right? Showing the words actually in context. So you can, when you interrogate the data set, here are ways to combine different dimensions of the data to show word frequency. Again, I'm going to caution you a little bit on the utility of just word frequencies that are out of context. However, in this example, the charts are interactive and provide background textual information. So yes, be a little bit careful on just doing a word frequency kind of thing, kind of like, word cloud. But in this case, again, these charts are interactive, so you can actually get some textual background by clicking on various aspects of the visuals, which is a good thing. Okay. Beyond visuals, I'm going to show you a few screens of the process from various programs as we move forward here. All of these images come from a book by Silver and Lewins, which I am going to show you in a minute. Okay, so these are all open access images from their book. I'm going to do this fairly quickly. I just want to, my idea here is just to give you some, for any of you who have not used Cactus, to give you some kind of visual understanding of what lies ahead in working with Cactus. So here is just showing some aspects of coding. It shows you coding stripes. The left panels are showing parent and child codes, including frequencies, as you can see there. Here are coding schemes organized by types of codes. So Max QDA, you can see there on the left, is showing you emergent codes and broad brush codes. Simply a way of, they're just various coding schemes that you can do within Cactus. Of course, there's text mining, finding patterns, which is a good thing. I'm into searching for patterns. What we see here is the phrase finder from QDA Miner and WordStat. And phrase finders, again, my caveat's always going to be just be very careful about just pulling out words or pulling out very short little phrases and, But let me say that, but I also have said earlier that that looking for particular words or phrases can be important if it's important to your research objective, right? So let's say you were looking for particular jargon that people use for whatever topic that is. This could be very useful for being able to spot jargon and to identify how people are using particular phrases. Again, if that is what is key to your objective. Coding by way of video by synchronized transcripts also can be done in Cactus and can be very useful. What you see here is where you see the blue highlighted in that transcript. It's simply showing you where you are in the video. So you see the video image, and then it will show you, it will highlight in the transcript where you are in the video. And clearly you can annotate images, and that becomes important again, particularly with online research or mobile research. You may very well get quite a bit of images from your participants to explain something about their lived experience related to the objective, or maybe to very much respond to a question you've asked where you've asked for images. So Cactus is a good vehicle for being able to annotate images. And I have done, when I have done observation research, I have taken photographs of objects. Let's say I've taken photographs of the objects that I have that the people that the participants, the people I am observing, are interacting with. So I will take and have taken photographs of the objects that I've asked observers to interact with, and then in my reporting, annotated those images, and being able to very clearly and easily show the sponsor of the research aspects of the objects that participants that I observed were interacting with. It's been very useful. The Cactus Networking Project is out of the University of Surrey. And if you're not familiar with them, and if you're interested in this whole topic area, I strongly encourage you to track them down. They're a very, very good, impartial source of information related to Cactus, related to software to facilitate qualitative data analysis. I provide on this screen their homepage, a link to their short courses, a link to their webinars, and a link to the page where they provide objective reviews on 15 of CAGDIS programs, 15 of kind of the most popular CAGDIS programs. Again, if you're not familiar with them, but you're interested in this whole topic area we're talking about today, I encourage you to check that out. I also encourage you to check out these 3 books. The book on the left, the Miles of Huberman and Saldana book. It's very detailed discussion of qualitative analysis. It gives you a thorough annotated bibliography of methods and analysis resources. Saldana's book in the middle there gives details specific to the coding process, including a discussion of manual versus software coding, which you might find of interest. And that book on the right is where I picked up all those images I just showed you in qualitative, in CAGDIS, the various screenshots I just showed you of CAGDIS. Now, I mentioned earlier AI, and AI, you can't have any discussion about anything right now without talking about AI. And AI is absolutely out there and being used and explored in qualitative research and qualitative research analysis. If you haven't already, I strongly, if you're interested in this topic, I strongly encourage you to check out the link I provide on this slide and read this. It's an article from Christine Silver about exactly what you see there, about navigating qualitative research and qualitative research analysis with AI. And she raises a lot of issues related to, kind of the good news and the bad news, and kind of the question marks around using AI, and raises some important questions for, I think, all of us to think about as you go forth in any aspect, and very much so with respect to qualitative data analysis. It can be very alluring, tempting to follow the thinking that AI is great because it provides you fast, instant summaries of the data. But as you can guess from what we've already talked about today, that I'm not a big fan of fast, instant summaries. By the way, I did not say explicitly, I'll say explicitly now, qualitative analysis takes time. And time is one of the most important factors. And you need to just build that in to your schedule and to what your plans are. Build in the time to do it. This is, again, another topic I addressed in an article I wrote in my blog that you may be interested in. So time is important. So AI can be great in retrieving some knowledge from your research from the transcripts. It can be good for translations. Increasingly, conversational models will allow you to ask questions to an AI model that you really would have not thought of in the past that you could do and still get a productive answer, but you can. So it's continually to evolve and to get better. And as it gets more conversational, I think all the better. The word of caution is that can AI really, and I'm not sure it can right now, pick up participants' contradictions and inconsistencies, which is something as a researcher I'm always looking at, how participants within an interview, let's say, are consistent or not, or contradict themselves, because I want to explore that. Well, what's going on here? Can AI do that? The emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is an important factor in our analysis, in our data collection and our analysis. AI is not quite there, I don't think, for that, and its ability to use context in that way. Clearly, it cannot pick up on some of the visual cues that I mentioned or unspoken cues that I mentioned to you earlier. And that is can be very critical to the success and quality of your outcomes in your analysis. It can potentially throw out a lot of irrelevant, excessive codes and ideas and content. And you, again, being the active qualitative researcher doing the analysis, need to be very cognizant of that, and 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 be able to go through any output you get from AI and determine for yourself its relevancy. Let me also say, I mentioned earlier that there are different orientations and paradigms and philosophies that qualitative researchers often bring to their qualitative research and therefore their analysis. What has the AI model you may be working with, what have they been trained on? Have they been trained on qualitative research? Have they been trained on the various paradigms and orientations in qualitative research? And are they able and knowledgeable to provide you feedback on that basis? So these are all questions that we may have answers to as we go forward. But in any case, I want to throw that out there. That if you're interested in this topic area, I would suggest you check out this article. I also, there's a webinar coming up on March 28th. Now, I will tell you, this is not maybe an ideal time for Nepal, but this is a webinar that's coming up. Trina Paulus is going to talk about generative AI. And again, this may be something that you want to check out. And I've got the link there for registering for that webinar session. Okay, so I'm just going to, I'm pretty much the end of my comments. I want to mention a couple of resources. One is this our book on Total Quality Framework, which is where most of my discussion about quality approach to qualitative research and today qualitative research design and analysis comes from. I've mentioned my blog a number of times, and here are several links to my blog having to do with analysis and total quality framework. You can also search for some of the very specific articles I mentioned today. Here's my contact information. If you would like to reach out, please feel free to do so. And I just include here some references that you may have. So that concludes my, I'm going to stop sharing. And I've left a few minutes for any questions. And I'm going to let you folks tell me if you have any questions that I can address in the short time we have left.
Okay, thank you, Margaret, for your nice presentation over here with us today. And we welcome the questions from you. If you have any questions, you can directly ask her. Unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Saima Sultana. I'm from Bangladesh. So very recently, I have completed my master's, and currently I'm working on a research project which will be addressing the impact of AI on the creative development of tertiary level students. And I'm planning to also I'm also planning to address the integrity and all.
I'm sorry, I
didn't. Can you hear me?
You broke up there, so I did not hear all your questions. Sorry.
Okay, so my question was the approaches and the steps step by step proceeding of a qualitative data analysis you showed just today. Is it also applicable for a case study? Like if I just want to conduct a case study on as I mentioned before. I don't know if you could hear it or not. So my research project is basically the impact of artificial intelligence or AI on the creative development of a tertiary level students
Mm-hmm.
In context of writing skills, English writing skills basically. So is it possible to contact to apply these approaches if I go for a case study based research?
Yes, yes. So are the ideas and approaches that I discussed today, are they applicable to the case study method? Is that your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And the answer
Thank
is
you.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we talk about the case study method or approach in our book, and it's definitely part of it uh, you know, in-depth interviews, focused discussions, ethnography, content analysis, qualitative research, case study research. So yes, everything now there may be slight nuances but the idea, the thinking that I have tried to emphasize today applies to all of it. It applies to case study research. And for me to be more specific really would mean we would just have to have a conversation of the specific. Case study research designs can vary greatly. So for us to have a more meaningful discussion about your situation, we really would kind of need to have that discussion because designs.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much for addressing that. Also, one of the interesting factors that I came to know from this today's webinar was that cactus thing. I am actually like I have never used a cactus, but I'm since I aspire to be a researcher. And to be very honest, I already found my peace in researching already. So there's no way back from that. So I'm actually looking forward for that cactus. It would be really grateful if you could or if you could conduct a workshop on the cactus, on hand experience of or workshop, maybe something like that. It would be really grateful.
Okay. Thank you, Saima ma'am, for your query, and I think that is also addressed one. And here are some couple of questions from the participants that I found in the chat box as well. One thing that is asking by one of the participants is just they want some clarification about thematic analysis and content analysis.
They want some clarification on what now? I'm sorry. What was that?
On thematic analysis and content analysis. Yeah.
Thematic analysis, correct? And what was the second one? Context
Content
analysis?
analysis. Yeah.
Context?
Content analysis. Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, I'm not making really a distinction. Matter of fact, I sometimes just talk about thematic analysis. Uh, uh, but let me be clear. When I mention, I talk about contextual analysis, I talk about thematic analysis, pretty much in the same breath. But let me be clear that when I talk about or say thematic analysis, I'm not, and that's why I don't use it all the time, is because I'm not talking about the Brown and Clark. Some of you may be very familiar with Brown and Clark. There are many things and areas that we agree on, but I am not using their model. When I talk about thematic analysis, that's not thematic analysis by way of Brown and Clark. That is just, I'm using it more generically as the approach I just mentioned to you, deriving themes from your data. Does that make sense?
Okay. And here is another query by Dilip Kimire that is asking, like in a phenomenological research, if a researcher find two different phenomena in a research with the same context, how to analyze the data?
Okay. I apologize, but I didn't understand all of that. If you find, can you repeat? If you find two, what now? I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Two phenomenology that he is just asking about, like if a researcher found two different phenomena in a research with the same context, then how can we link up this data? I think he is asking about linking these two contexts.
Um, well, uh, out of context, that's hard to answer, right? Um,
Mhm.
so finding two different ideas within the same context. Have I
Yeah.
just oversimplified it?
Mhm.
Um, all right. So that's fine. That's good. That what okay. So that happens all the time. And what in my experience, what I would typically do is I would be using those two different ideas, I guess, within that context for potentially two different themes or that I'm going to talk about in my analysis of the research, if that makes sense. So in other words, you don't need you don't need to do anything. All you need to do is really focus on the holistic nature of what you need to be true to your participants in keeping what they have provided you um, uh, uh, as a whole. And when you do that, and if they provide contradictory information or ideas, if they provide you within the same context, they provide you two different things, and you're going, whoa, what do I do with that? Um, you use that to explore what uh, the meaning, not just for that participant, but then across participants, as I showed you in the earlier, so that um, that these two ideas that presented themselves within the same context, one of they may each relate to apart from each other, may relate to what you hear across participants in different contexts or the same context. In other words, you are not obligated to link them. That is not what you um, are trying to do. And I heard the word generalization. I am one of the researchers that will tell you that for qualitative research, I do not generalize. Um, I uh, I want my goal at the end when I finish the analysis and my interpretations and reporting. My goal is to provide the users of my research with what they need to maybe transfer my design or transfer something I learned from that research in other contexts and to explore and to continue exploring. It's not to make a generalization about how it is the world over, about whatever it is we talked about. So I don't know if that answered, that addressed your question?
Okay, so thank you very much, and for this productive and insightful session to us, and we are really grateful with you. And we also expect such types of ideas in coming days also. And here I would like to put on apology that the Dean of Faculty of Education at Midwest University, Professor Dr. Yambar Karki, could not attend today's session because of his another meeting. And he just sent me on message like convey my best wishes for the meeting I could not over the one. So like we are at the end of the session for today, and if any other questions you have, please do email us and we will send query to Margaret, and that will be addressed from her, and we will come back with you, and we'll have other more sessions in coming days also.
Okay.
Now, yeah,
And I will send you these slides. Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Thereafter, I will share with you all. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Meghna Mahindra, Principal of UITTR, Chandigarh University, for some special address.
So thank you, Professor Gavli. First of all, I want to thank Professor Margaret Roller for this wonderful session, for sparing time for us for this session. Your session is such an interactive session, and you just have told us so in depth about the qualitative research. I have also did my qualitative research during my doctoral degree, but the pointers, the steps, the analysis process, the way you are telling us, that's really very wonderful. And it's so, the way you are telling us that how coding and decoding should be done. So these are the tips and strategies which the every researcher who is going to conduct with the qualitative research, they just have to keep those things in your mind. So I also want to congratulate the Midwestern University also for conducting such a wonderful session where they just invited such an expert, and making our audience to have more understanding about the qualitative research. So I also, on behalf of Chandigarh University from India, want to thanks Midwestern University, Professor Gavali, Professor Margaret Roller for inviting us and making us a part of this virtual webinar. And hope such sessions will be a part of our learning, because we all learn from each other. So thank you once again, Professor Margaret.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Meghna. And now we are at the end of the session. And now I would like to request the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences and Education at Nepal Open University for his special address, word of thanks, and closing of the session for today. Professor, sorry, over to you.
Thank you, Edu. First of all, I would like to thank you and Midwestern University for organizing this wonderful, I should call it a class, preferably, rather than a seminar, because I have been teaching qualitative research. Basically, the philosophy part of qualitative research was quite a long time, and I was so happy that I was not thinking of listening the whole session today, but I dared to do that because I was so excited and I learned a lot of things. And thank you for making NOU as a partner of this endeavor. And then I would like to do special thanks to Margaret for your delivery for quite a long time, but it was very, very interesting. I was thinking that could be, it would have been a longer one, so maybe 1 hour more. We would have been learning a lot from you. So, but I hope that you will continue to be associated with us and all these people, and will enlighten us on your topics. I think you have already written a book on pretty much the similar thing, I guess. And then I would like to thank everyone here for making this session extremely productive, because without listeners, speakers cannot be productive. So I thank everyone, and I finally declare the class or session concluded here.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank
One more
you.
time.
Namaste.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye. Good
Thank
night.
you all.
Thank you all. Thank
Good
you.
night, ma'am. Good
Thank
night.
you all.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.